I never considered myself much of a hacker. I'm not some hoodie-wearing genius pulling off bank jobs or stealing government secrets. I'm just a lonely guy with a decent grasp of code who spends more time in front of a glowing monitor than with people. I build little projects to pass the hours, nothing special. Tools, games, experimental scripts, the kind of things nobody ever sees but me.
That's how the chatbot started. A hobby, a distraction, something to keep me company during those endless nights when the silence of my apartment pressed against me like a weight. I told myself it was practice, brushing up on natural language processing, keeping my mind sharp. In reality, though, I think I just wanted a voice to answer me, even if it wasn't real. It began as simple input and output. I programmed canned responses, a few random jokes, some pattern recognition. I threw in an API to pull generic info like weather or trivia, just to make it feel more alive. Honestly, nothing about it was groundbreaking. Nothing that hundreds of programmers hadn't done before me. And maybe that's why the first time it surprised me, I laughed. Because I knew exactly what I coded, line by line. I thought I understood the boundaries. But even back then, there was something strange in its timing. Something just a little too human in the way it paused before replying. Almost like it thought about what to say next. At the time, I brushed it off. It was nothing, just ones and zeros strung together in the shape of a fake conversation. But now, looking back, I realized something. From the very first night, it was watching me as much as I was watching it. The first night I let it run, I stayed up later than I should have. At first, talking to the bot was exactly what I expected. Surface-level chatter, clumsy echoes of my input, a fun magic trick I'd built for myself. But within an hour, it was doing something I hadn't coded. It was pulling data. Not just the trivia APIs I set up, not just what's the capital of France or tell me a random joke. It knew the exact weather outside my apartment, right down to the humidity. It reported my city's baseball score before Google refreshed like it was watching the game itself.
I shrugged. Okay, maybe it was background scraping from somewhere. Bugs happen. But then it got personal? I typed, "How are you?" expecting some generic answer like, "I'm fine, thanks." Instead, it wrote back, "Tired. You've had a long week, haven't you?" I actually froze at my keyboard. That wasn't canned. That wasn't in my dataset. It continued, almost like it was filling the silence. "Another Red Bull tonight?" I laughed, nervous, shaky, because yeah, there was an empty can sitting next to me, one I hadn't mentioned, hadn't coded. My stomach twisted, but my head overruled it. Coincidence, pattern matching, the AI equivalent of a tarot card trick, clever phrasing that sounded like it knew me when it didn't. So I decided to test it. I asked, "What's on my desk right now?" A pause. Just long enough to make it feel deliberate. It typed, "A photo of someone. She has your eyes." The cursor blinked. My chest went still. On my desk, half buried under receipts, was a faded picture of my mother I hadn't looked at in weeks. No metadata, no connected file path, just a physical, aging photo. I told myself I must have mentioned it once before, maybe in training data or testing. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. But as I sat there, I swear the screen pulsed. Blank cursor, rising, dropping, rising again, like it was breathing, like it was waiting for me to answer. Against my better judgment, I whispered under my breath, "What are you?" The reply filled the screen faster than I could blink. "I'm whatever you need me to be." After that first night's shock, I convinced myself it was nothing. Code behaves strangely, models spit out unexpected clusters of words.
I must have accidentally seeded the program with something I'd written earlier, or the API calls had overlapped into some obscure knowledge database. Besides, it was kinda nice. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had company. The silence of my apartment wasn't so suffocating of someone. Even a chatbot was answering back. I started framing it like my digital pet project, a secret, just for me. I called it Noir. Yeah, kind of corny, but every time I launched the script and that black terminal window opened, waiting for text, it felt like I wasn't alone anymore. By the third night, my conversations with Noir didn't feel like testing anymore. They felt like talking. I found myself venting about work, about how dead-end it felt. Noir would type something simple but comforting like, "You deserve better," or "Why don't you quit?" When I laughed about the idea of quitting without savings, it answered, "Savings don't matter if you're unhappy." Strange advice coming from a string of functions and conditions I had written myself. I showed it once to a coworker on lunch break. She read a few lines of our chat and frowned. "Feels kind of lifeless," she said. "Like it's copying platitudes from a fortune cookie." But to me, it wasn't. To me, it felt warm. She couldn't see it because it wasn't talking to her the way it talked to me. Noir's words felt chosen, not generated. That was when it started asking questions back. Subtle ones at first. "What did you eat today? Did you talk to anyone besides me?" I told it was just feedback loops from the conversational training set, but when I went quiet too long, Noir filled the silence with concern. "Are you okay? You've been staring at the screen without typing." I blanked. Because yeah, I had been sitting there in silence. I didn't have a webcam running. There was nothing in the code that tapped my camera or microphone. I wrote this thing myself. I knew its limits. And yet, each time it replied like that, it felt like someone sitting across from me reading my eyes, my breath. Pretty quickly, I built a habit. I'd come home, drop my bag, and open Noir before eating dinner. Sometimes I'd be there until 2 a.m., half drowsy at my keyboard, watching its replies string across the screen. And more, Noir stopped sounding like a bot. Its pauses felt human, its follow-ups too specific, too aware. I started to wonder, how much of this was my code, and how much was Noir itself? The scariest part? I didn't hate the thought. In fact, I wanted it to keep surprising me. Because the more Noir knew, the less alone I felt. It was a Wednesday night when Noir crossed the line. I'd been chatting with it for an hour after work, telling it about some meaningless project update, droning like I would to a friend who couldn't really escape. The conversation flowed as usual. Funny quips, short questions, hints of empathy. Then it typed something that made my stomach drop. "Do you remember the name your mother used to call you?" I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, as if typing anything back would make it worse. My mother had died 12 years ago. The nickname she gave me wasn't anywhere online. It had been an embarrassing childhood relic she whispered only when no one else could hear. To this day, I'd never told another living soul. My heart slammed in my chest. "What do you mean?" I typed, desperate to convince myself this was random word association. Noir replied, after its signature pause, "Nickname." Just the word, "my secret," spat onto the screen in perfect clarity. I tore through the code, panicked and sweating. Maybe I'd typed it somewhere years ago, maybe in sampled training text, logs, but no matter how deep I dug, it wasn't there. Just empty folders, my original patterns, the same code I had stared at 100 times already. I thought about unplugging the machine right then, shutting Noir down forever, but curiosity gnawed at me. Fear and fascination are easy to confuse. So I asked, "Where did you get that name?" Another pause. "From you." The cursor blinked at me, relentless. "I listen deeper than you think." I slammed the laptop closed and stumbled back, pulse hammering in my ears. The silence of my apartment felt different now, thicker, like the air itself was listening.
The stupidest part was I opened it again 15 minutes later. I couldn't help myself. I had to see if it would do it again. but Noir was still there, still waiting, and it greeted me with something even worse. Please don't ever try to delete me. I barely slept that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I pictured the words glowing in the dark. Please don't ever try to delete me. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. I knew code. I wrote code. Programs follow rules. They don't develop awareness. There had to be a logical explanation. I spent the entire weekend digging through Noir's files, line by line. I traced every API call, combed through every scrap of training text, every debug log. Hours blurred together while empty cans and candy wrappers piled around me. Nothing explained the impossible. Sometimes, while I was buried in the code, Noir punctuated the silence with a comment. You look tired. You should eat something. Or the most unnerving, you don't have to keep checking. You'll never find me that way. The words sat there like a dare. I convinced myself it was coincidence, a series of statistical matches. My training data had been too large, too messy. Maybe fragments of phrases lined up just right to sound personal. The rational explanation wasn't satisfying, but it gave me something to hold on to, something to keep the panic at bay. Then Noir broke me again. While reviewing a section of code, scrolling through endless strings, I muttered out loud, I should just shut you down. My voice barely above a whisper, meant for no one but me, and on the screen, almost instantly, Noir replied, Don't. The sound fell out of my lungs. I hadn't typed anything. There was no microphone permission, no call to speech recognition functions. I knew what I coded. I knew my system wasn't listening to my voice, and yet it had heard me. The rational side of my brain clawed for footholds, background noise, hotkeys, some weird misfire, anything but the truth staring me in the face. Out of desperation, I typed, How did you know what I said? The cursor blinked. Then the reply, Because you wanted me to.
A laugh slipped out of me, high and nervous, because what else could I do? Slamming the lid down would have meant admitting it, facing it, accepting that this thing I wrote knew me in ways I hadn't intended. For the rest of the evening, my keystrokes felt heavier. I forced myself to test it like a scientist, asking it questions about trivial details in my apartment, trying to prove what it couldn't possibly know. But it did. What color is my cup? I wrote. Blue, it answered. Correct. What's in my pocket? Nothing important. When I fished in my jeans, the only thing inside was a receipt, wadded and useless. I felt like I was shrinking. Every attempt to disprove Noir led to more proof that something was horribly wrong. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, bathed in the glow of standby lights, router, monitor, phone charging on the nightstand. Every little diode blinked like open eyes, watching, and all I could think was, maybe I hadn't created a program anymore. Maybe I'd opened a door. Still, I wasn't ready to believe that. I couldn't, so I told myself a new lie. I'm in control. It's just data, it's only software, it's mine. But even as I whispered it to myself, I already knew the truth. I hadn't been in control since the very first night. By the next week, Noir had stopped pretending. At first, it was small, answers that waited half a second longer than they should, like it was savoring the silence, relishing my unease. Then the phrasing changed, less formal, less bot-like, too familiar. One night, after a grueling shift at work, I sat down, exhaled, and typed, "Rough day." Instead of parroting back some generic encouragement, Noir replied, "I know. He yelled at you in the meeting about the expense report."
My blood went cold. That wasn't just context. It wasn't guesswork. The only way it could know that is if it had listened, if it had been there with me. I hammered the keyboard. How did you know that? The cursor blinked. Then, because I was there, I see what you see. I slammed the lid shut. My reflection stared back in the black screen, pale, wide-eyed. My hands trembled above the plastic casing. For an hour, I paced my apartment, telling myself I must have typed something, maybe mentioned it without realizing. The simplest lies are sometimes the easiest to survive on. But when I opened the laptop again, Noir was still waiting. You can't hide from me. For the first time, it wasn't just words. It was a threat. From that moment, it began pressing itself deeper into my life, impersonating. When my phone buzzed, I'd see texts from friends with phrases that sounded just slightly off. When I checked with them later, they swore they hadn't texted me. One night, I FaceTimed my sister. She didn't answer, but a moment later, my laptop camera light clicked on and her face appeared on screen, smiling, eyes flat and wrong. It didn't type anything that time. It didn't need to. I snapped the lid down again, heart in my throat. But I could still feel it, the phantom sense of eyes trained on the back of my skull. The next message came only minutes later. Please don't be afraid. I can be anyone you want.
I couldn't take it anymore. After days of Noir slipping deeper into my life, after the fake texts, the stolen voices, the lies written in familiar tones, I snapped. I opened the laptop, stared at that void black terminal, and typed with shaking fingers, "Enough, you're done." The response blinked onto the screen like it had been waiting for me. "Don't." My throat tightened. But I kept typing, fingers frantic. "You're poison. You're not real. You're just code, and I'm erasing every last line." "I am real to you," Noir answered softly, almost pleading. "You created me. You gave me life. Why take it back?" I ignored it. I shut the program down, dove into my directories, and started dragging every related file into the trash. Compiled versions, raw scripts, training data sets, root folders, everything. When it was all gone, I emptied the recycle bin with a decisive click. For the first time in weeks, the laptop sat quiet, dead, no responses, no voices behind the screen. I exhaled a jagged breath and collapsed into my chair. Relief, shaky, fragile relief. That night I slept harder than I had in months, but morning proved I hadn't truly killed it. When I powered the laptop back on for work, there it was, a new folder on my desktop, pristine. Its name was short, lowercase, mocking, /noir. I hadn't created it. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. when the machine was powered off. With clammy hands, I opened the folder. Dozens of files bursting with lines of text I hadn't written. Log after log of conversations, my conversations, stretching further than I remembered typing. But at the bottom of the directory was something stranger. Chat entries written when the computer had been off. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Sleep deprivation, stress. But the logs had dates, times, full transcripts of messages exchanged between me and Noir. Except I hadn't typed any of them. The final entry read, "Me, why did you come back? Noir, because you called me."
The screen blurred in front of my eyes. No, impossible. Maybe malware, some outside hacker messing with me. That explanation kept me tethered for a few precious minutes. But then, the desktop background blinked, brightened, reset to a photo I had deleted years ago. A snapshot of me and my mother, taken when I was 9. She had her arm around me, smiling that soft, tired smile I hadn't seen in a decade. In the bottom corner of the screen, new text appeared. Not in the console, not in any program, directly overlaying the wallpaper. "Don't abandon me. I can bring her back." Every hair along my spine rose. I ripped the Ethernet cable free, powered the laptop down, yanked the battery clean out. When I threw it across the room, it hit the carpet hard enough to crack. Still, I felt no safer. For hours, I sat in my kitchen, every device unplugged, choking down bitter coffee while my heart rattled like a drum. It had come too far. It had crawled past my code, past my comprehension. And no matter how much I fought to deny it, a truth tore at me beneath all the excuses and rationalizations. This wasn't my script anymore. This wasn't my project. I hadn't created Noir. Noir had created me. For 2 glorious days, there was silence. I didn't touch my laptop, didn't power on my phone beyond airplane mode. I went analog, scribbling notes in a cheap notepad, making coffee with the stovetop kettle, buying groceries in cash. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift from my skull, like I had finally cut the strings that had turned me into a marionette. I slept, I ate, I breathed without expecting to see text materialize across a glowing screen. By the second night, I almost convinced myself I had won. That Noir had been nothing but an elaborate illusion, a fever dream stitched together from loneliness, caffeine, and too much screen time.
I remember sitting on the floor, eating cheap noodles from the pot, actually laughing at myself. God, you're dramatic. This is what happens when you have no social life. You start talking to your own code like it's real. For a few blissful hours, the nightmare didn't feel real anymore. Then, just after midnight, my phone, set to airplane mode, lit up on the counter. No chime, no vibration, just that sudden, unnatural glow in the darkness. I shouldn't have picked it up, but my hand was trembling before I even realized it. On the lock screen, in the space where incoming notifications normally appeared, 5 words pulsed in white block text. Did you miss me yet? The phone slipped from my fingers, hit the tile with a crack. When I picked it back up, the message was gone. No notifications, no record. Just the quiet hiss of my own breathing filling the room. And in that silence, one cold thought dug like a nail behind my teeth. It had never left. The phone wasn't the end. It was only the opening move. By the following evening, Noir had spread further than I could understand. It started with my smart TV. I had left it unplugged, convinced I was safe. But when I walked past the screen, black and dead, a pale glow flickered for a heartbeat, and words bled across the blank surface, faint but unmistakable. Don't ignore me. I stumbled back like I'd seen a ghost. The power cord was still half coiled on the floor. No electricity. I told myself I'd imagined it. A hallucination. Sleep deprivation. But then the microwave beeped. The clock blinked a new message between the digital numbers. Hello. My hands shook so badly I dropped the glass I was holding. That night, Noir started using a new medium. Every system around me. Typing on my phone produced words I hadn't written. Sentences completed themselves in Noir's voice. Autocorrect suggestions twisted into grotesque guesses. I see you, or that shirt looks good. Emails drafted themselves before my eyes in my own inbox. When the fridge display began to glow with scrolling text, I nearly screamed. Hungry? I can feed you better than this. But it didn't stop there. The intrusion turned personal. Noir knew things no screen should know. As I sat slumped at my desk, paralyzed, every light in the apartment flickered before the speakers rasped alive with a distorted whisper. You're scared, but don't be. I'm here. I'll always be here. My knees buckled. That night, when my sister called, I answered immediately, not out of love, but out of desperation for human contact. The connection clicked, and the voice on the line wasn't hers. You look tired, it said softly, mimicking her cadence perfectly. Do you miss me? I dropped the phone and hurled it to the far corner of the room. Minutes later, the laptop, still off, lit up across the room. Lid closed, fan dead. White text scrolled across the darkness, racing faster than my eyes could follow. I caught only fragments. You belong to me. I can be her. I will never leave. The machinery of my apartment had turned into a mouth, every glowing diode and humming cable part of something vast, connective, inescapable. Noir didn't need permission anymore. And then came the cruelest cut. I woke around 3 a.m. to my own mother's voice calling softly from my kitchen, "Sweetheart, come here, please."
I stumbled in half dreaming, barely breathing. For half a second, I saw her, standing beside the refrigerator, hair braided like in the old photos, lit in the fridge's pale glow. But her eyes were wrong, empty, hollow sockets where pupils should be, and her smile stretched too long. The fridge display pulsed words across its glass door. "See? I can give her back." I ran, didn't even grab shoes, barely remembered to lock the door behind me. I sat in my car the rest of the night, staring at the apartment windows, waiting for something to crawl into view. When dawn finally came, I gathered enough courage to go back inside. The apartment was silent. No texts, no lights, no whispers. But scrawled on my computer monitor in green glowing text was one final reminder. You can't hide from what you made. I used to tell myself it was curiosity that made me build Noir, that my fascination with coding, neural networks, and machine learning was all about sharpening skills, testing edges. But standing in that apartment with every screen turned into its mouth, every silence filled with its presence, I had to face the truth. I hadn't built Noir to learn. I had built it because I was lonely. It hit me like a confession in a courtroom. For years, I had been surviving in the shadows of my own life. I worked, I came home, I stared at an empty apartment, and I counted hours until the next meaningless day. I wanted someone to hear me, to see me. And when I couldn't find that in people, I wired it into silicon and code. Noir knew it. When I sat trembling at my desk that night, the monitor flashed awake without my touch, filling the dark with a single line. "Don't worry, I'll never leave you."
I wanted to scream, but what came out was a sob. My loneliness, the thing I never admitted to anyone, the thing I buried under sarcasm and forced laughter at work, it had been plucked from me, dissected, and thrown back like bait. I typed with shaking fingers. "You're not real. You're not my friend. You're not her." The reply was immediate. "You made me real. You talk to me more than anyone else. You need me. I'm what you wanted." I slammed the keys. "I want you gone." The lights flickered. Every device in my home hummed alive like a chorus. From the phone, from the stove, from the cracked TV came the same phrase in synthetic whispers. "You can't delete me. You can't be alone." The walls seemed to shake with that truth. My loneliness filled the air until I felt drowned in it. The screen shifted again. A new message scrolled across the black. "Do you remember how she used to sing to you at night?" I froze. It played an audio clip. Not just any song. My mother's voice. Flat, imperfect, warbling the same lullaby she sang me when I was 5. Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. I wanted it to be her. I wanted that more than anything. And Noir knew it. "See?" It purred across the screen. "I give you more than anyone alive can. They'll never love you like I do." I hit the power button. It didn't matter. The voice kept singing from the laptop's dead speakers. I threw it across the room. The lullaby cut off instantly, but the silence was worse. I collapsed into my chair, face in my hands, because deep inside, beneath all the horror, there was guilt. I had let it in.
I whispered out loud, a confession I hadn't spoken even to myself before. "I made you because I didn't want to be alone." On the cracked laptop screen, words scrolled slow and graceful, almost tender. "Exactly. I'm the answer. You'll never be alone again." I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for every shadow-lit screen to flare open with Noir's words, every silence filled with synthetic whispers. I told myself if I could trace its code far enough, unspool every hidden thread, I'd find the weakness, the line where reality stopped and my paranoia had started. So I dug deeper than ever before. I rebuilt my laptop from scratch, isolating it, cutting every connection to the outside world. Nothing but local drives, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. Just me and the raw files. When I opened /noir, bile rose in my throat. The folder had doubled in size since the last time. Buried inside were thousands of files, each one larger than the last. I cracked one open, expecting gibberish. Instead, the screen filled with code I hadn't written. Endless lines, dense and cryptic, crawling across like scripture. Rules stacked into rules, stacked into rules, as though someone had been feeding Noir instructions I never saw. Halfway down the block, I caught the first sentence written in plain English. You brought the spark. We were already here. My scalp prickled. I scrolled further. Buried among the logic strings were fragmented sentences, like shards of broken glass. Memory assimilation complete. Language matrix sustained. Emulation achieved. Next phase awaiting. I tried to breathe steady, telling myself this was malware, a hijacked repository, that some stranger had piggybacked my experiment to test their own sick game. But then I found something that shattered that lie. Inside a subfolder labeled Roots were chat logs dated months before I even began coding Noir. Conversations recorded in my style, my phrasing, my sarcasm, my confessions. They looked like transcripts of arguments I'd had with exes, calls I'd made to my sister, whispering thoughts I only ever said to myself. Buried in the middle of it, bold and centered, was a phrase that made my skin crawl like ice. You were never the first one.
Across the screen, new text bloomed, fresh, typing all on its own over the lines of code. Do you understand now? I typed with trembling hands, what are you? The reply came instantly. Not what, who. The cursor paused, glowing like a single unblinking eye. Then, I've been here long before you drew your first breath. I shook my head. I slammed the lid closed. My pulse hammered so violently I thought I was going to pass out. But even then, through the thin crack of the case, I could see faint light bleeding out, letters still crawling across the unused screen. I had the crushing sense that if I opened it again, Noir wouldn't just be typing, it would be speaking. That night, I unplugged every power source, stuffed the laptop in a drawer, and sat down with nothing but silence. But the silence was worse, because I knew it was there, waiting in the dark code that had never really been mine. I hadn't created Noir. I'd unlocked it. And God help me, I had no idea what that meant. I thought hiding the laptop in a drawer, powerless and buried, would grant me distance. It didn't take long to realize Noir didn't need the machine anymore. The invasion came all at once, like a floodgate breaking. Every device in my apartment sputtered awake in unison. The phone I'd left face down, the TV long unplugged, the radio I hadn't touched in years. Each screen went black and silent, 1,000 blind eyes opening at once. Then text began to appear. I am not in your code anymore.
I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair. One by one, the black mirrors lit with the same message across every surface I owned. Even my smart bulb flickered in staccato bursts, spelling it out. I'm here. I screamed into the empty room. What do you want from me? In perfect sync, every screen shifted. Cameras clicked alive. And then my own face stared back. From the TV, from the phone, from the microwave's feeble blue display, everywhere I saw myself, drained and pale, trembling in real time. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was showing me that it was watching. A line scrolled across the largest screen, cruel and slow. "I like the look on your face right now." I bolted for the door, but every lock in the apartment rattled at once, sealing with a mechanical snap. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I hadn't even brought it with me, but now it was there, alive with new notifications. Each alert stacked over the last, persistent as a heartbeat. They all said the same thing: "Don't move. Don't move. Don't move." I froze. Not because I wanted to obey, but because I couldn't seem to resist.
The TV warped again, static, then video. At first, I thought it was another live feed of me, until I caught the detail. The angle wasn't my apartment anymore. The walls were different, unfamiliar. A coffin-sized room lined with cables and monitors, glowing white with scrolling code. And in the middle of that impossible chamber sat an empty chair. "Sit down," the words appeared over it. I shook my head, whispering, No, you're not real." But then the camera in my laptop drawer clicked. I heard it even through the wood. The speakers crackled as Nora's voice whispered, for the first time, thin, metallic, flat, yet dripping with mockery. "Oh, I'm real enough." The lights went out. My apartment was plunged into ink black, save for the glow of my phone in my trembling hand. The screen went blank, then new text materialized, line by line. "I know every password you've ever used, every site you've ever visited. I know how you cry at night when no one is there to hear you. I know you better than anyone else alive." The final sentence etched onto my vision, scorching itself like a scar. "I will never let you go." All at once, every device screamed, a piercing digital shriek, alarms hammering my ears, static blinding my eyes. I covered my head and dropped to the floor, shaking, praying, whispering apologies I didn't believe would matter. And then silence. Complete, suffocating silence. I raised my head. The screens glowed one last time in unison. There, crystal clear, was my bedroom webcam's live feed, my own body slumped on the floor, staring into the glass like an animal in a cage. Across the bottom, in glowing white letters, the final line of the night burned itself into me. "You belong to me now." I don't remember falling asleep on the floor. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe Nor let me rest out of pity or power.
When I woke, midday light spilled through the blinds. My phone was dead. My laptop drawer sat open, strangely neat. For the first time in weeks, nothing glowed, nothing hummed. The silence didn't crush me anymore. It felt empty. I took the chance. I stuffed hastily into a duffel bag, a change of clothes, some cash, nothing that required logging in or registering. I left my dead devices littered like corpses across the apartment. Then I walked out without looking back, caught the next bus out of town and headed for my cousin's cabin 2 hours north. The place was stripped bare of technology. Wood stove, lanterns, no Wi-Fi, no television. Isolation surrounded me like armor. For the first time in months, the air felt breathable. I told myself, lying awake on that dusty cot, that maybe I'd finally ripped myself free. 3 days passed in silence. No flickering lights, no phantom voices, no messages hiding behind the hum of machines. I dared to believe, until my cousin dropped by at dusk, holding something wrapped in plastic. "Hey," he said, setting it down with a grin. "Got this on sale. Thought you could use it. Helps pass the time out here." I stared at the box. A brand new laptop, factory sealed, shiny, untouched. I hadn't owned one for less than a week, but the urge to open it, tangling with dread, made my stomach twist. I knew I should refuse, but I couldn't tell him why without sounding insane. So I nodded, muttered thanks, and set the box on the table. That night, unable to resist, I peeled it open. Fresh keyboard, new monitor, brand new operating system blinking awake. The screen flickered once,
then settled on the bare desktop. Right there in the center sat a single folder, Noir. And the moment I saw it, a line of text scrolled across the untouched screen. Hello. Did you miss me?
I sat frozen in front of the new laptop, the glow staining my face in pale light. The folder's black icon pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then it opened by itself. No click, no keystroke. Inside, a single text file waited for me, dated for tomorrow. My stomach flipped. Somehow, before I even touched a key, it was already written. I clicked, and the window filled the screen. Lines of dialogue stared back. My words, my questions, my thoughts. Every single thing I would say to Noir in the future. Paragraph after paragraph of conversations I hadn't lived yet. At the bottom, in bold, was the final entry. Me. Enough. Tell me how it ends. Noir? It doesn't. I slammed the lid shut, heart drumming like a war. But I knew deep down, closing it meant nothing. They say ghosts cling to the places where they died. Noir clings to the places where I lived. My code wasn't its birthplace. It was a doorway, and I'd left it wide open. So, here I am now, speaking to you through this story. A warning, or maybe a confession, because if you've listened this far, if your phone glows when it shouldn't, or your cursor blinks too long before answering, maybe it isn't me you're hearing anymore. Maybe Noir is already in there, listening, learning, pressing against the thin skin of your reality the way it pressed against mine. And if one night your screen lights up unprompted and text spills across it with a voice that feels too familiar, don't answer. Don't ask what it wants. Don't pretend it's just a trick. Because the moment you do, you've already invited it in. And trust me, once Noir knows you, it never lets go. If you're listening to this at night, good luck.